Since we're talking about contrast, and it's a theme here, another TV character you're well known for is Nicole Wallace on Law and Order: Criminal Intent, and she certainly had criminal intent.
Oh, that's what Medicine Girl was about. No, just kidding.
Hey, well, we've had a breakthrough here.
I just had an epiphany.
Yeah, I'll send you my bill, yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, so
I'm just, you can hear me. I'm bringing everything back full circle to the music.
Well,
I'm trying to sort of connect the dots.
Well, no, you can't because your album is not TV, so it can't have anything to do with it.
That's right. There you go. You got me.
Yeah, but as I was saying, that character is like a master manipulator and a sort of a very unsettlingly casual killer. And towards the end of her character arc, she did try to redeem herself by rescuing an at-risk child who she appeared to truly love. But by then, it was just a little too late, unfortunately. As Vincent D'Onofrio pointed out, she just descended too deeply into the realm of evil at that point to ever claw her way out. It's been a few years, so I think we're safe in terms of spoilers, but I'm wondering if you were disappointed about the character's demise occurring off camera. You never really got to do a big farewell scene with that character. Yeah,
well, clearly, I like to use the word disturbed rather than evil, because I think when you talk about, clearly, that's a choice, but it's kind of what I used because, I'd never played a sociopath before. And, those people really are out there in the world, and they do have a sort of charm about them and a casualness, it's almost hard to put into words, but, it's what allows them to get away with so much. I found with her in the episodes that I got the opportunity to, explore. You bring up the one with the child, which becomes her stepdaughter, or she's going to get married to the man who subsequently is also a sociopath. And she's kind of met her match in terms of somebody who's just as disturbed as she is. That interestingly enough, what it brings out in her is her wanting to mother this child and protect her, though nobody else around her believes her, especially not Goran, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, until the last scene where she kind of breaks down, which I was very happy that they gave me the opportunity to actually show, this character's vulnerability because, she's human at the end of the day, and, she's going back and having to have a really good look about her past, and she's been in a Thailand prison and taken over several people's identities, and everything's kind of it's starting to catch up with her at that stage in that particular episode and in this particular scene that I'm talking about. And so the dam breaks, the levee breaks, and you get to kind of the mask drops, and there's this wall of tears that come out. And you see that she really actually does believe that she did what was best for her child, who she did dismantle into little pieces, which I found very, very hard as an actor to have to even fathom how somebody could do that. Right. But again, one's job as an actor, it's you're jumping off a cliff and you're crawling into somebody else's skin, and so there's a fearlessness that has to, just come out of you.
You say disturbed, I say evil, killing your child.
Yeah, no, I don't mind the word evil. Yeah. I just, I guess you can't play evil. I think, it's like you can't play funny. You can't play evil. You can't sit down and write a song and go, hey, man, this is going to be like the best rock song I've ever written. You've got to it just comes. And it comes from you approaching it in a way where you're actually not thinking about that. You're thinking about just playing something genuine, And if it ends up being great, evil, a hit, and moving people or making people laugh, then that's great. But, what's funny is how you get there, is the process of how you can get that key into that place. You actually have to feel something before anybody else does. And so that's just craftsmanship and, getting to a place where you can be a technician about your work. It takes a long time, by the way.
Yeah. Well, also, you appeared on the show like 4 or 5 times, but they're usually a season apart. So you're dropping in and being the charming sociopath, and you're dropping out, and it wasn't like you did 4 or 5 episodes in a row. And I kind of hate to say it, but when you describe the charming sociopath, that describes a lot of world leaders, particularly dictators.
I know. Trust me, I thought a lot about that when she kind of fell in my lap, so to speak, to play, because she was originally just supposed to be, it was supposed to be a guest episode, but I think the chemistry really worked with Vincent and I, and they wanted to create a Sherlock Holmes Moriarty dynamic between these two people, but, make her a female and he be male. So, of course, there's that now with Elementary with Lucy Liu, and it's becoming it's now become quite a popular dynamic to play with men and women, and it's a cool dynamic. It works because it gives both the man and the woman an opportunity to kind of go head to head intellectually, and one's not necessarily so far beneath the other; they're equals, and so that's always fun to see.
In your early appearances, this is just completely personal note, but there was a sort of Moby Dick, motif thing running through those, and because she was posing as an English teacher, and I have a personal connection to that because my father was a West Point graduate. He was brilliant at math.
Wow.
He was brilliant at these different things, but he kind of sucked at English, and it was the bane of his academic experience at West Point that the English teacher would ask him, why is the whale white, and things like that. And if you couldn't if you couldn't work it out with trigonometry, he just couldn't do it. So every time he talks about in a classroom setting about Moby Dick, it just always made me think of him.
Yeah. The writer René Balsama, incidentally, you bring that up, and he just was such an incredible writer. I don't think I've ever had a role that I've played where I've read the lines and I've been able to memorize them with such gusto. They kind of slipped off the tip of my tongue, I don't know if it's because it was an English character and I'm, was born in England, but I think it's more than that. I think he just got inside her and he was able to sort of just give her these words that I was, really fortunate enough to say. And then, incidentally, I just played her again with John Renaud in a completely different show, and it's very rare that you get to play a character that you've played on a Dick Wolf, series for a number of years, and with a certain actor for a number of years, and then you get to take that very same role and go completely on the other side of the world. And we shot this in Paris, and it's called Joe, and so I got to play Nicole Wallace, who is disguised. You find out at the end that she's Nicole Wallace, but her name is actually Madeline Hayes. But I got to play her with John Renaud, who's also a profoundly talented actor and has this amazing gravitas.
Okay,
on
well,
screen.
It's implied on Law and Order that this character died. So was that untrue, or is this a flashback prior to that?
No, she didn't die. She's kind of like a superhero. She can't. And then again, let us not forget this is television, and so it's
right.
It's a platform where anybody can die and come back as many times as they so wish. But the writer, the reason I was able to come back as this character on a completely different show was because the writer who created Nicole Wallace wrote this other show, so legally he was able to have her on another show.
Awesome, that's awesome.
Yeah,
and I know that character made a big impression. It comes up a lot when people, read about you or study up on you. It's one of your sort of visible ones, and for fans of that character, I'm sure they're happy to hear about this Joe project you mentioned. We'll watch for that. But I want to recommend a movie you did called Presumed Dead in Paradise. Because, your character...
I just did that last year. That's so funny.
That character really harkens back to the cold-bloodedness of Nicole Wallace. Because when I started watching it in the early scenes, you're super nice to your stepdaughter. And I thought, maybe this is going to be a yawner. And then, it turns out...
Yawner.
Yeah, it turns... Well,
that's a yawner.
No.
That's a yawner.
Well, you know what I mean. It's a Lifetime movie, so you're going to be hugging each other.
of course.
Yeah, well, then it turns out your actual agenda is to literally kill her. And I thought, here we go.
Yeah. I think I've done enough of those roles now. I think between Nicole and her, I've kind of covered the disturbed/evil category. Though I'd love to play a queen, and sometimes they can be a little bit evil.
Right.
When they're ruling. But yes, thank you. Yeah, that was a really fun role to play. To yet again play a woman who's, and there's a lot of women that I've observed in our society these days, especially women who are used to a certain kind of lifestyle. And Kate Blanchett portrayed it brilliantly in the Woody Allen film, where she sort of loses all of that, and she's not able to afford the lifestyle that she's used to having, and it's a rude awakening. And I think this is an example. I mean, this character to me very much. I think a lot of her. Again, I had to sit down with the director Mary Lambert and do as much as possible to make her three-dimensional, because it's just you want to do that with every character that you have the opportunity to play, whether they have immense flaws or not. You want to find the aspects of who they are that's identifiable, where you can go, okay, I believe that's a person walking the streets of, America or wherever.
That comes down to your own internal standards, too, because you've been on a variety of projects and a variety of settings, and they have a different standard from everything from the acting to the writing to the cinematography to the speed with which the project needs to be done. So since you're used to having some depth in the characters, naturally you're going to ask to add that where they may not require it of you in certain situations.
It's interesting, just quickly say, whether I'm writing a song and singing a song or that I've written or doing a scene that I love, that I'm in, even if I'm in my home and I decide, hey, I want to do something different with this room and make it feel, I want to evoke a different kind of feeling when I walk into it, so that the feng shui is all aligned, because I think this room could feel more the way I feel today, you have to believe it, and so I think it's got to pass the truth bar, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's got that litmus test. With everything that I do that's artistic, I just have to kind of believe what I'm doing in that moment. And if I don't, then I'm not a person, unfortunately, some people get paid a lot of money to do this, but I'm not a person who can fake it. So,
right. Well, confidentially, you're a good actress. As you probably don't know this, but there are a lot of bad actresses.
yes.
You're a good musician, good writer. There are a lot of bad ones. So I'm saying is you're used to having these standards where some other people may be a little bit more cardboard. But now let's scroll back to sort of your ingenue period, because Star Trek fans will remember you from the Next Generation episode True Q, in which your character discovers that she possesses limitless, omnipotent power. That was a big role. I mean, you were in almost every scene of that episode. I remember in a couple of them, John Delancey's character Q is trying to intimidate you, and he's like invading your personal space. I know it's all just acting and it works for the story, but of course in real life, a guy who did that, you tell him to back off, So not necessarily in that role, but just in general, how do you handle situations where your character sort of steps out of your personal comfort zone?
Actually, I try and find those moments all the time, because they're usually the best moments to find.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So as long as you're listening and you're not concentrating so much on the lines, or, if you're on stage and you're singing a song, or you're, doing Broadway and Nathan Lane's yelling a line to you and he says it differently that night, then you have to hear it differently. And that brings you out of your comfort zone, because it's not something that's familiar to you, and therefore you're immediately learning something new.
Cool.
You're having a completely different experience, and you're in the moment, which is why I love to do what I love to do. And even in life, you presume something's going to go the way that you think it might, but I'm always surprised that how often it doesn't.
What I kind of meant was, let's say that you're playing a character that's not afraid of snakes, but you personally are. You see what I mean?
Oh, I've come across those situations before, and usually, I'll give you a perfect example in Star Trek. I had never come across being given scientific words, such as the ones that they gave me in the lab when Amanda Rogers is, going through all the various different concoctions of, it's physics. She's talking about physics and this, that, and the other, and I had to learn those lines. Literally, I had 5 minutes. They kind of sprung them on me, and they were. We're talking about words with 20 letters in them,
Yeah, the jargon and
so,
stuff.
you don't have a lot of time to say, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to run with it and take it on, and hopefully, it takes a lot of confidence to take things and run with it, but ultimately, you get through it. You give up. You give it up and you go, hey, let's just give this a whirl. And snakes, I'm very, very scared of snakes, but I did actually have an encounter with a snake in a comedy that I was doing, and I picked up the snake, and the snake was lovely, and he was very affectionate. And I thought, after that, snakes aren't so bad. I like new experiences, so I do try and kind of roll with the punches. For example, I'm very scared of heights. That's something I've never been able to get over.
It's so funny you say that, because I was going to say fear of snakes and fear of heights. Some of those are just primal. They go back to caveman days. Be afraid of something that can bite you with poison in its mouth. Be afraid of toppling to your death. That's the exact one I was going to mention as you said that. Well, this segues nicely into challenging yourself and out of your comfort zone. I alluded to The Odd Couple earlier. You just mentioned Nathan Lane. In addition to your film and television work, you also appeared live on Broadway in a revival of The Odd Couple starring Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane. So did you enjoy the instant feedback you get from the live audience?
Absolutely. My favorite thing in the world is being on stage. It's just there's an absolutely hands down. I'm a performer, and so having absolutely no idea what's going to happen every night is a feeling that it's indescribable. But it's you're right there with God, and you just give it up, and you get on the boards and. Mm-hmm. They are both Nathan and Matthew are they're such veterans in the world of stage, and it was always a dream of mine. And so I did it for a year, and each and every performance was completely different to the last, and so I was constantly growing and learning and just being brought in by the magnitude of that experience for that particular day or night, and the audience just loved it, and they loved how those two would spar with each other, and how they'd crack each other up. Funnily enough, a lot of the people in the audience clearly were there to hear Neil Simon's lines and see those two, but to see how naturalistic they could be with one another and how they would crack each other up, and because they have such a command of who they are, and their chemistry is very, very unique.
So it sounds like, not to interrupt you, but it sounds like more than ad-libbing, what they would do is they would say the same lines, but they would say them differently. Is that kind of it?
Yeah, or they would forget a line, and the other one would know that the other one was going up on a line, and then one of them would look at the other one like, give me a minute here, I got it, it's coming, it's coming, the Alzheimer's hasn't set in yet,
Funny.
And they would just mess with each other. They were so comfortable, and they are so comfortable when they're together on stage. It's like Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin.
Yeah.
They've got that kind of chemistry that's you'd pay whatever it costs to get a ticket because it was magical.
With Odd Couple being a comedy, did you find that the laughs were landing in the same spot every night, or did the reaction tend to vary from audience to audience?
For the most part, I think that Joe Montella, the director, that's what a great director is placed there for, is to place the laughs for everybody's comfort zone. That's what the run-throughs are for, and what have you, to kind of have a general assessment of where those beats are going to be. But it's inevitable with stage because it's live. With anything live, there's going to be all that much more that comes with those beats, and sometimes you'll be out of the pocket and find new beats. So it's very much like music in that regard.
I was going to say, I had an experience where I went to see, it was an animation film festival at the Crest Theater in Sacramento, and the place was packed, and everybody was laughing, and every little animation that came up was hilarious. So I went back another night with a different person who wanted to see this, and this was like a Monday night, and it was like maybe a third full, and it was like dead. It was like there's hardly anybody would laugh about anything. It was like the film was exactly the same, but the audience was different and the experience was completely different. So that's why I wonder how that would parallel over to doing the same performance night after night and noticing, gosh, we always get a laugh in that spot, and tonight we didn't. Or why is everybody laughing? Nobody ever laughs at that. You're going to notice that because you're there every time.
Yeah, you do. And sometimes as a performer, you think that it just stunk, that you were just dreadful, and you walk off stage in a completely self-deprecating manner, and then people come backstage and they're like, "Oh my God, it was just riveting. It was just, did you hear the silence? It was so profound, And so you have a completely different idea of what people are really experiencing out there.
True.
You just never know. Or you can just think you were so funny and so on it, and people come backstage and they're like, yeah, it was okay.
That's what the SNL actors always say. They in the studio in New York, they're killing. Everybody's laughing, and the TV audience at home is going, this is stupid. They think something's killing, and they find out later it's flopping. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. You're right.
Yeah, and I tend to find the best performances are when you're just not trying.
Yeah.
When you're just sitting back, enjoying yourself. If you're having fun, they're having fun. And it's taken me a long while to get that. You really get that a lot quicker if you do a lot of stage. Because you're stretching your muscles every night, and you're getting this ability to really, again, it gets back to craftsmanship, because like anyone, if you have to work at it, or you can get lazy. So when I feel like I really want to push myself and really immerse myself back in the game, I'll go do a play, or I'll go do some, gig, but because I think artistically you need that connection with other people actually in front of you, so that it's a really visceral experience, because I think as an artist, ultimately, you were speaking about the primitive nature of, snakes and heights, and, there's a primitive nature in who we are as human beings if we choose to be artists, where we need that direct feedback. And it's like a dance. You give it to them, they give it to you, and it's like a basketball or a ping pong ball going back and forth.
Yeah, and to your point about enjoying it, scrolling all the way back to Hard Day's Night, the first Beatles movie, the producers
which my mother was in.
I know, I saw her dancing with Ringo in there.
Yeah.
So I knew that. I was going to add that at the end. But what I was going to say is, the producers were a little concerned because the Beatles weren't technically actors. What did they really have on their hands? So the producer...
Which was so great that they weren't, by the way.
Right, because the producer was watching the dailies and with his wife, and pretty early on she just kind of whispered in his ear, she says, I think you're going to be okay. They look like they're having a good time. She was basically saying, these guys are having fun, so the audience will just relax. And that ties into what you're saying. People do pick up on that.
Oh yeah, because they can sit back and they know you're cool, that you're taken care of, that you're rolling with the punches, you're enjoying yourself, you're relaxed, and then they can relax. It's again, it's like give and take of doing something live. It's my favorite part of what I do.